This is the roll call for the special freeholder budget workshop meeting, March 6, 2019, at 5:30 p.m. Freeholder Fantasia. Here. Freeholder Graham.
Here.
Freeholder Hertzberg.
Here.
Freeholder Patillo.
Yeah.
Freeholder Director Yardley.
Here. Okay, approval of the agenda, with a motion.
So moved.
I'm sorry.
So
I just need to read the open public meeting statement.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're close to approval.
Would you like to do the flag salute at this time?
Yes. Have a moment of silence, please. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, adequate notice as defined by Section 3D of Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, has been made by regular mail, such notice being submitted on March 1st, 2019, from the Administrative Center of the County of Sussex, located at 1 Spring Street, Woodland, New Jersey, to the following: New Jersey Herald, New Jersey Sunday Herald, Star Ledger, WSUS Radio, WNNJ Radio, and is also posted on the bulletin board maintained in the Administrative Center for public announcements, and has been submitted to the Sussex County Clerk in compliance with said act.
Okay, approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? No executive session, none. Proclamations, certificates, presentations, none. Public hearings, none. Public session from the floor. Motion to open it to the public. Motion. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion.
Comments are limited to 5 minutes or less and must only address issues regarding agenda items. Please state your name, print your name and municipality on the sign-in sheet, and please speak loud and clear.
Bill Getler, Wantage Township. This county budget's been a disaster since I moved to the county, just 30-some years ago. Every year, we get told we're gonna see relief. See articles, there's no signs of any relief in this. This is tragic. We need reductions in this budget, not more increases. People run for office, they say they're gonna do the job, as soon as they get in office, they turn belly up. We need a reduction in this budget, not another increase. There's a lot of cutting can be done. Last year, there's $1 million in the 9/11 fund. They can't break even, shut it down. They went out and they competed against other centers for the business. They lowballed the price and they snuck the money into the budget. Get that $1 million more out of the budget. Cancel the McGuire project. We have no need for it. Go down the budget and chop. You're just chasing people out of this county that can't afford to live here. I have more neighbors moving out now. If you adopt a budget with no increase, Wantage Township will see about a $65 increase because of the change in equalization ratios. Branchville, about a $55 increase. Newton, about a $40 increase. Of course, Sussex Borough is going to see about a $90 decrease. So it's fine in Sussex Borough. If you increase the budget, we go up. A 2% increase, one is getting $90-some increase. How many more people you want to chase out of this county? We're facing the same problem with the schools. And High Point, besides their budget, they have to pay Mr. Rippey his $30,000 increase. Also going to affect the budget, I think, is this DEP proposal with the C1 streams. Now, within 300 feet of a stream, can you put salt on the roads anymore? Or are you going to have to use it more expensive? Or are you going to be able to do anything on the roads? I have a graduate at Rutgers Creek on the end of my property. 600 foot of that road now may not be able to be handled except by a plow. Until we get the fallout of what the DEP is proposing, you can't figure out what it's going to do to your budget. For the Kenny College, we go back into the county taxes. There's county taxes from 1999 up. The spending champions for Sussex County for 2001. They increased the budget 11.71%. 5 million. 2017 is 5.3 million, but that only increased it 6.27%, not 11%. Two members of the board were Burrell and Morris. I don't know the voting record, but I know the tax record. We paid heavily for their being on this board. They should not be included in anything. That reason and other reasons, Burrell should not be named as a Sussex County College Board. Quick aside, a major problem has been hinted at in the Herald. I know it's not this board. It's gender. The schools in the whole state, and we opened it up in Sussex Wattage, are destroying the families. They're taking control. If a student, 8, 9 years old, walks up to a teacher and says, I'm a he or I'm a she, they have to do something about it, and they can't notify the family. We are destroying the families in every school district in this state. I think this board should get involved in that. I just dropped the information off at Wantage Township, and I've asked that they get involved in it. This is a major problem. We're destroying the families, we're destroying people's rights, and we're destroying the Constitution. And a minor point was that I have another meeting to go to. I invite all of you to take a ride to Sussex Borough, travel about 3 miles south on Route 23, turn on Blair Road. It's about 1.25 miles long. Wide open country road with a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. This is county route 673. I haven't gotten a speeding ticket. I can't say anyone has. Many times when I travel that road, there's a police car sitting there. The road seems to be wide open, 60-mile-per-hour zone is for 25. I'd like to request that you have a traffic study done in that road and find out why it can't be 50 miles per hour. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to address the board? Okay, I'd like to close it to the public. Do you have a motion for that?
I'm sorry.
Second.
I'm not trying to hide information from you.
Thank you.
There's a copy. Been around for years, it's just updated.
I'm sorry.
All in favor?
I'm sorry, who was the second? I didn't hear.
That's Dawn. That's on second. All in favor?
Aye.
Freeholders' comments, do you think we can hold those off till the next meeting? Sure. Approval of the consent agenda, none. Approval of minutes, none. Appointments and resignations, none. Resolutions, none. Board of contracts and change orders, none. Financial, we'll have the budget review. Personnel, none. Administrative report, none. Well, I don't know. Do you have an administrative report? Anything like to report?
No, we'll cover it in the budget review.
Okay. County council's missing. Unfinished business, none. New business, none. Public session from the floor. So, Oh, I kind of skipped over the financial budget. So we'll have the budget review now before we go back to the public. Okay.
Okay. I'd like to just bring the freeholders' attention to the letter that's at the top of your packet. Please disregard the one that's enclosed in your other that says municipal budget update, as it's a county budget update. There have been several modifications to the draft county budget from the document that was distributed to the subcommittees on February 22nd and 23rd. The 2019 proposed county budget calls for revenues and appropriations totaling $112,198,489. The modifications and a brief explanation of each are as follows. We've received a confirmation of a 2019 federal grant, that is the Violence Against Women grant. The grant is now included in the county operating budget and has no impact on the county tax rate as proposed. The total for all grants and the offsetting appropriations in the 2019 budget is $4,162,470. The county anticipates approval of additional grant awards throughout the year, and that will be incorporated into the county budget using the provisions of Chapter 159. The social services budget, after the final review for the social services budget and the initial review by the state, decreased the administrative county share by $736 and decreases the services county share by $529. The sheriff's motor vehicle purchases, based upon the price of vehicles for the sheriff's department, the line item in the proposed budget is being increased by $5,500. Fleet management parts, based upon items 2 and 3 above, result in a net change of $4,235, which is being offset by a reduction in the auto parts line item. And then 911 part-time on-call pay and jail nurses part-time on-call pay was requested by the Sheriff's Department upon final review to move $24,000 from on-call pay in the jail to on-call pay at the 911 Communication Center, and that change has been effectuated. The 2019 draft county budget calls for a rate decrease of 0.00252. The county's net equalized value increased 2.43%, primarily due to inflation. The change in the county tax rate represents a $25.78 increase to the 2019 average residential equalized value of $256,941. The 2019 draft library budget calls for a rate increase of 0.001357. The change in the county library rate represents a $5.14 increase to the average assessed home of $236,935. The reason for the difference is because Sparta Township maintains its own library independent of the county library system. And the county open space tax rate is proposed to remain flat. As I'll comment in a minute, the county tax administrator certified that revenue generated in the increase of value of property with the county equals $275,545.26. With that, I would just like to draw everybody's attention. It may be most convenient for the board to look at the printed PowerPoint slides that you have, especially those sitting on the far end of the dais. I do have it up for those seated in the public. As I mentioned just before, the proposed 2019 county budget calls for appropriations of $112,198,489. It represents a 2.31% increase, or $2,536,634 from the 2018 budget. The significant increases in the 2019 budget as proposed include group health insurance, public works other expense, general government other expense, and statutory expenditures. And the table there shows what the change between 2018 and 2019 is, with a total increase of over $2.5 million. What's interesting in this is that these four appropriations represent 99%, or just over 99% of the total increase in the budget. So keep that in mind. These four appropriations constitute the total increase in what's being proposed in the county budget. Again, group health insurance and the statutory expenditures representing pension obligations, that's been fairly consistent across government budgets for a number of years. The increases in public works other expenses come from three areas primarily, and that is an increase in facilities operating expenses to meet the needs of our facilities division to maintain the more than 750,000 square feet of county facilities. It also represents an increase in being able to purchase administrative vehicles with general appropriations, which previously had been charged off to a reserve, and that was discussed with both the subcommittees. And then lastly, the increase is for snow and ice control. General government other expenses, that increase essentially represents the increase due to the change in the way in which county counsel's office is funded. It's no longer funded through a salary and wage line, but is funded through the other expense line, and the majority of the increase for general government other expense is as a result of that change. So I'm not going to bore everyone to death, but other than to say that, and the freeholders are certainly aware of this, there are three budget caps that the county is required to comply with: the 1977 cap, the 2010 tax levy cap, and the 2017 county entity budget cap. And I'm pleased to report that the budget as presented complies with all of those statutory budget caps. Appropriations that are made to advance the county priorities. We continue to fund additional monies for the long line and pavement marking program in the Office of Bridge and Traffic Safety. The Division of Health is working towards its national accreditation, which is anticipated in 2020. We are proposing to fund a safety consultant to update policies and procedures, specifically in the road division, as we have upwards of 70 individuals that are operating within the county right-of-ways on a daily basis, and it's appropriate at this time to update our policies and procedures to make sure that we are being as safe and protecting our workers as much as possible. And it had been mentioned earlier in terms of one of the larger increases in the budget is to provide funds for vehicle purchases, both within the Office of Fleet Management and the Sheriff's Department. As was previously stated, new construction, the revenue generated is certified by the county tax administrator is an increase of value of property within the county that equals $275,546, and the net valuation taxable has increased, and the county's equalized value has gone up 2.43%, or $412,904,680. At this time, I'd like to ask, we have Ray Serenelli Sr. and Ray Serenelli. I'd ask Ray if he would give a presentation to the board just to put into context the county budget with other budgets that they've reviewed.
So what you're looking at in front of you is a list compiled by the Division of Local Government Services and provides the average county tax to the average taxpayer. It actually provides the school and municipal tax as well. And what you can see on there is that the county is 9th out of the 21 counties. So you're in the 38th percentile. You're in the service industry, you're there to provide a service to your constituents. So being 9th, while it's not the lowest tax rate, you're providing a good service to people at a reasonable price. So, as you look forward and you're getting into the numbers and getting bogged down into the percentages of what your increases are, you're starting from a lower point than 13 other counties. So your 2% is less due to previous boards' conservative attitudes towards the budget as you're having towards this budget. So it's good to know that you're being frugal with what you're looking at. Additionally, if you start to compare where you could be potentially with some additional increases above the 2% that you've already allocated. So just by increasing an additional 3%, you'd be generating another $2.8 million of county funds.
The numbers, I'm a simple person.
Mm-hmm.
So we just talked about a 3% increase then on the total
So it would
budget.
be a 5% total increase of the tax levy.
So what would the percentage of tax be? What I'm looking to do is, we're at 1.9%
Mhm.
tax, okay? So if we're gonna make a change, I need to know what the impact is on that versus the total number. Are you saying that a tax rate of 3%, is that what you're saying?
I'm saying this budget calls for 1.9%.
Right,
If you went up to 5%, which would be an additional 3%.
okay, got it. Didn't
Okay.
do that part, thank you.
So it would be 5% total,
Okay.
would generate $2.8 million that you could put towards capital funding instead of debt. If you did that, you'd be 11th instead of 9th. You'd be in the 50th percentile. If you wanted to jump 2 more spots and be 13th on this list of county taxes, you would be able to fully fund your debt and not have to issue bonds. It would call for an additional 15%, 17% total of increase in the tax levy. Huge number when you're talking about percentages. Comparatively, it would jump you 4 spots compared to other counties. So while I'm not suggesting it's something you do, it just enables you to see where you are compared to other counties. Food for thought.
I appreciate that.
So to continue on, from the conversations that we had at the committee level, and I know that there's been some discussion to give consideration to how the county might go about funding its capital improvement fund differently. We've put together an example of what a change in the tax rate would be. So you'll see in the chart that you have in front of you that the 2018 rate per $100 of equalized value was 0.543942. The rate as proposed, which funds capital improvement at $500,000, is a rate of 0.541420, which represents a $25.78 increase to the average county home. What we've laid out in the next several slides are then alternates that might be considered increasing the amount in capital improvement, increasing the amount in the tax rate, and then in turn, increasing the amount that would be put into capital improvement. So I'm just going to jump ahead because it'll become a little more clear because we give the details on the subsequent slides. So So the tax rate in the proposed budget, as I said, is 0.541420. You would see that the average homeowner value has increased from $251,010 to $256,941. The average homeowner will see an increase of $25.78, even though there is a 0.46% decrease in the tax rate. The amount to be raised for new construction is $93,853,896, or 1.9% increase from 2018. So I just want to emphasize that the budget as proposed complies with the goals as established by the budget subcommittee to limit the amount to be raised to something less than 2%. And so the budget that you have before you this afternoon, in fact, complies with what the expectations were of the budget subcommittee. Now, some of the alternates, which would in turn then fund capital improvement fund at a greater rate, is alternate 1, and the average homeowner would see an increase of $28.73, and the amount to be raised would increase from 1.9% to 2.12%. And Elka, that would provide for $700,000 in capital improvement fund?
Yes, that'd be an increase of 200,000.
Alternate 2 then, in turn, the average homeowner would see an increase of $39.30 and increase the amount to be raised by 1%, or $94,768,896. And that would take total capital improvement fund appropriation to
$1,415,000.
the last then would be a 1% increase in the rate, and the average homeowner would see an increase of $46.17. That would take the total amount to be raised up 3.4%, or $95,233,896. And that's summarized, and that would put capital improvement fund at $1.8 million. And that can be summarized in the table up there. So the amount as proposed is $500,000. Alternate 1 would take the capital improvement fund appropriation to $700,000. Alternate 2 would be $1.4 million, and alternate 3 would be $1.8 million. And then we just give you some detail to show you what that change in investing in capital improvement fund would be. And Elka, maybe I'll have you take over from here.
Okay, so this next slide just shows you on a graph as opposed to a table, the difference of your capital improvement fund between the proposed amount, alternate 1 and alternate 2 and alternate 3. If you go to the next slide, which is more in line with what we were directed to look at, is capital appropriations. If you look at the graph, the green line on the bottom is going up, and that's your capital appropriations. And then the line on the top, the orange line going down, is your new bonding. So if you have a range of what you want to spend in capital each year, as you're fully funding more of it, you'll be bonding less, which will result down the road in less interest that you're paying. And then if you go to the next slide, if we were to keep the level as proposed and the different alternates of the dollar amounts over 6 years, for the proposed amount, you'll be putting $3 million into capital. If you go to alternate 1, over 6 years, you'll have $4.2 million. Alternate 2, you'll have almost $8.5 million. And in alternate 3, you'll have $11,280,000. So in 6 years, that's how much you would not end up bonding, less the down payment, but that's pretty much what you can fully fund and avoid bonding for.
So that's to provide the board with just a sample of some of the alternates that we've considered as the board gives consideration to what it would like to do relative to funding capital projects in the county. I'll just take a moment to highlight some of the significant capital projects for the county, which includes road resurfacing, $3.3 million, site remediation, $1.2 million, guide rail maintenance of $1.2 million, building improvements at the community college of $1.1 million, transportation professional services of $441,000, replacement of voting machines, which is a partial replacement. We're actually accumulating money in the capital improvement fund over the next 4 years. We started last year to be able to replace the voting systems, and I know the board has seen some correspondence on that most recently. There's paving proposed at the community college of $360,000, security upgrades to various county buildings of $291,000, improvements to the public safety paging system, which again is a second phase in a project that was started last year, and then improvements at the technical school of $242,000. And then I might just ask Elka to run you through the last slide, which talks about the total capital projects committee recommendation and what the funding of that looks like.
Okay, so in your other proposed budget, you have the detail of this, so I'm not going to go through all that, but the summary is up on the slide, and basically, the capital projects committee recommends $13,353,853. Of that, $2,055,878 would be funded, fully funded between grants, what's in capital improvement fund, and also older ordinances that can be repurposed, which would leave $11,297,975 to be funded. Of that amount, the technical school has asked for $242,409,000 in projects. The county college, less their Chapter 12 input from the state, is $1,500,000, which gives you a down payment base, because you don't have to put up a down payment for the tech school or the college, of $9,555,566. So our down payment on that would be $477,778. We're listing separately the debt authorized less LSRP, and after I go through this, we can go into that a little bit more, but the debt to be authorized less LSRP would be $9,992,197. LSRP is $828,000, which the 2019 proposed debt to be authorized is $10,820,197. And the difference of the target is $820,197, and the debt for county projects, less tech school and SCCC, is $9,077,788. And I don't know if Greg, you wanted to talk about the LSRP?
Sure. As the board is aware, but for those members of the public that are here, the county has a number of sites that are under the supervision of a licensed site remediation professional. And there are a number of projects that are contained within the 29 county capital improvement program. Two of those projects that are located at two sites, that of Frankfurt and Layton, require the excavation and disposal of contaminated soils. And so the $828,000 represents the cost of those two projects in Frankfurt and Layton, to remove and dispose of the soil that's considered hazardous. In order to be able to meet what the county's capital investment needs are, I'm requesting that the board give consideration to accepting out those projects, those two projects that total $828,000, because they essentially represent the cost of excavating and disposing of soil. Once those sites, that material is removed from those sites, there will still be some additional remediation to be done, but effectively the substantive work at those sites then will have been completed. My concern is if the board requires of us to include that $828,000 within the $10 million limit, it will set the county back significantly in terms of being able to meet our other capital needs. And so that's the reason why I've asked the board to give some consideration to set that outside of the $10 million limit, in as much as these are two projects that will be completed and represent the excavation and disposal of contaminated soils.
I have a question.
Sure.
Up in the 2019 Bethesda County College, it was like chapter 12, 1.5 million. When we had our board of school estimate meeting, I believed it was 2.8, which would mean our portion was 1.4. Why is this listed at 1.5?
That's for the 2020 budget. They're a year behind when they do the resolution, so
So this
last
was
year
prior.
they approved the 3 million, which the 1.5 is ours, and next year there'll be 2.8 in the budget.
Okay, I have a question. Any questions yet?
Yeah, that pretty much sums up our presentation. I might just, for ease of reference, we have included the summary along with some detail within the other budget packet. You all will be familiar with seeing the budget presented in such a fashion. Yeah, we certainly welcome any questions that you might have.
I have a question on the $7 million homestead money. That's not really the homestead money. And those of you that were here last year will probably know what we're talking about. Just a kind of a comment is that we need a plan, and just to let the public know that we've asked our finance people to at some point come up with a plan so that we have adopt a plan that we cover bonding, some voter approval on that, third-party bonding, and the way to deal with capital projects. At least a start. Just want to start with that. Now, the money that we have, $7 million, really for one-time projects, is that correct? Okay. So, in the capital, we're taking $500,000 for the capital project. Why can't we take money from that program towards a capital project that is a one-time deal? So we could take $400,000 from that money and put it towards a one-time capital project. That would reduce the budget by $400,000.
The oldest guy to answer?
No, because I know, I'd rather have a younger guy, because the older guy might know the answer to that, but go ahead. What's the answer to that?
Well, you can do whatever you want. The only restriction put on that money was that it be approved by resolution to be used. But, as a side note to that, your capital improvement fund or down payment money is an ongoing requirement to maintain the fixed assets that the county has, roads, bridges, buildings, equipment, all that. So it's really not a one-time expense to use the sale of the homestead, I would say, as
That
a
money's
revenue.
gone. That money, I take exception to that, Mr. Sarno.
Okay.
That, the money was used, and this came out of and $7 million was tied up as surplus, or however you want to call it, and it was tagged, reserve, and it was tagged on homestead.
Right. So you,
Go ahead.
no, I'm just saying, it sounded to me like you wanted to use it as the down payment money.
Well, I'm not saying the down payment. I'm sure there are, we're going to have, as we go down the road, projects that will come before this board, such as, and I'm not saying that the board's going to do this, this time, such as the River Styx Road Bridge, which would be a $4 million obligation to the county. We would use that money towards it. So and that's because that would be a 75-year longevity bridge. I think that if we have projects that will last many, many years, and in 5 years, the bond payments will start to decrease. Is that correct on the solar? And at 2024, is it, or 2028? Which one is it?
Let's start. Yeah.
What?
Both.
Okay, both.
In
So
2024 and
so in 2024, we start having a decrease in that. And so, along with what I'm saying is that I expect there to be a plan before the end of this year on how we're going to handle money going down the road. So I think as that goes down, we then have an opportunity to take that difference and put that towards capital projects to go down the road of getting to where we pay as you go. So some of the money that we have on hand could be used towards funding a project in that capital improvement program. I don't have, I can go back and take a look at that, but I thought that was one alternative, if that's an option, and I'm not sure.
Can I ask a question then?
Sure.
How is that money currently invested?
That's in our, it's part of our current fund cash and investments. So some of the money is in bank accounts, others were invested in the MCIA solar bonds. So part of all of our fund balance that is not, our liquidity of paying bills and when the timing of when bills come in and when we get revenue.
Right.
It's in investments or in bank account and when we need it.
I have a question. It's my understanding that the sale of the homestead now, the amount is $7.6 million is the valuation of that. I believe the intention of the prior board, or the board that actually engaged that transaction, the spirit of it was to actually put those funds towards programming for seniors, senior services, again, not recurring costs, but something that would benefit that group. I don't know if we have, in this current budget, something that fits, that we would be able to, take a portion of those funds for that. I also reached out to Greg today, asked where are the interest proceeds from those funds. In other words, how it's invested, what are we doing with the interest on that each year? It was explained that that's just rolled into our general interest. It's not kept separately, and it's already accounted for, so it's not something that's kept as a separate line item. I assume that that's correct.
Yeah.
But, again, instead of funding a bridge per se, I know it's a one-shot deal, but I would like to take a look and see if those funds could actually be directed or targeted towards what I believe their intended purpose was. Also, another question. Greg, you said in the general government line, county council is funded now in the general government line, other expense. If the money's coming into this new structure for legal, where are the savings realized elsewhere? So if this is the increase that's shown here, where's the savings? Where is that reflected?
The savings are reflected in the line above in salary and wages.
Mm-hmm. So it's just a simple transfer over?
You'll see if you were to look at the detail on the next page.
What page is that?
Let me find it here. It would be page 2 of 9. You'll see about midway down the page, 20-155. You see a reduction of $198,747 in salary and wages, with an increase of $377,847.
Can you just explain the difference between the 520,000 and the 200,000? I see that there's 377 down
Right.
here for other expenses.
Correct. So if you look across, the various items that are labeled other expenses under general government, you'll see a $95,000 increase in central services. The bulk of that is as a result of the consolidation of photocopying, telephone, and, what's the other one?
Postage?
Postage, thank you. So that actually has been taken from other expense lines in a continuation of consolidating and streamlining some of our accounting processes. You're seeing an increase of $58,000 in employee services, other expense. That represents an increase in the county's investment into human resources information system through our current payroll vendor, Prime Point.
So part of that upgrade of that system, having that would be under the general government.
General government 08, correct, yeah. So all of these. You have the increase in the county clerk, and you'll recall that Clerk Parrott was here and indicated that there's an increase in his other expenses due to the election mail-in ballot.
Yeah.
So that's the monies there. You see an increase in technology and information management of $33,000. That is to cover the costs of additional service contracts in support of the various systems that are under the management of the Technology and Information Management Division. You see an increase in records management. That's as a result of, I believe, Elka, is that grant that no longer is available?
Right, it was
Yeah.
for temporary services because the flood in the basement, they were able to get money from a grant, and now that money's all been used up, or from insurance. I
From
should say.
insurance, that's right,
Yes.
yeah. So that represents an increased cost as a result of the offset that we were receiving from insurance in order to support the records management office. Again, we mentioned the increase in county counsel's office. So if you take all of those items in total, that's what contributes to the overall increase in general government other expenses.
And the other expenses for county counsel's office, is that the other attorneys that we've contracted out for different stuff?
Correct. So you see a decrease of the $198,747, which effectively represents a decrease in what was the salary for the permanent employee who had been serving in the capacity as county counsel. The additional other expenses then represent the contracted services that are now furnishing legal services to the county. And you'll also recall that we did have an additional $125,000 that was incorporated into those expenses associated with the special bankruptcy counsel.
Right.
I have a general comment. I don't know if now is the appropriate time for it, but I just want to share what my initial thoughts are here. The prior board to us, I guess, had their budget subcommittee. and, give directives and so on and so forth. With us coming on, I understand the budget process starts long before January of 2019. I appreciate, Elka, your, doing the projections out as we came in and we saw what Josh and I perceived to be a woefully small amount put towards capital improvement.
5%.
Thank you. True story. So, however, when we look at being able to close that gap between our cash outlay and what we bond for, the answer is not going to be taxing without a plan. The amount of debt is staggering. The way to fix this in the long term, any kind of plan that we have can't just simply be tax the taxpayers. And I understand that's not at all what you're saying, but when we look at this, it's how much, how would we get to that $11 million and so on and so forth. And what is it? It's an increase in taxes, increase in taxes, increase in taxes. I mean, like the gentleman who came up here and said about the school boards, the state is certainly not offering any relief by way of education funding in any capacity. You have towns who are really struggling with individual issues that they have, whether they lost school budget funding, whether they have environmental issues. And although it's a noble cause for us to try to, reduce our burden of bonding, this is one heck of a year to try to do that, coming in the 11th hour and not being able to go through. I mean, I have so many questions by way of, contracts that we've had institutionalized for quite a period of time. Are we going out to bid on these? Positions, personnel, review of personnel, duties, responsibilities. I mean, these are all things that would be part of a strategic plan as we move forward to try to shave down. I mean, I can't pretend to know the answers to this, but I know the answer in this budget is to raise taxes. And I don't know, I'm just not comfortable with that.
And like you said, the directives that were given to them, that's why the process starts in August of a year, because there's so much work that goes into trying to do some of this stuff. And when you look at the line graph here, and you see 5% going into capital improvement, and the other 95% being bonded, that is certainly not going to get us out of debt. And that's certainly not going to be a long-term answer to reducing taxes. We can't continue to grow debt and think that that's going to be a long-term solution to lowering taxes. It's any solution that gets us out of this is going to have to be us getting creative and finding ways to cut, but it's also going to have to be raising more revenue in order to dig us out of this hole. Like you said, there's a lot of work that has to be done. We certainly can't do it in the timeline that this budget needs to be approved by the state, unfortunately. But we certainly have our work cut out for us.
I'd love to hear from the members of the board who were here prior about your experiences with it or what you've seen.
I just want to say that this is something that we've talked about, and I think there was a lot of discussion about it last year, but this year might be the year where we put in a transition plan that gets us from bonding to paying as we go. But we have to go with short and long-term goals to increase the amount of money we put into our capital appropriations. We would borrow less. One of the ideas that I thought about as we were discussing things was to look at a short-term goal, and that would be to fully fund our facilities projects, which would mean we'd have to invest between $2 to $2.5 million to cover the project costs. And there are already other cost-saving conversations going on that may change the outlook for next year as we go forward. This year, right now, is a very difficult one. In 2024, the solar debt begins to drop off. In 2025, another, I think it's what, 2024, it's, what do I have here? I don't have it here. Drops off 16-point-something% in 24, and then 25, another 13 million, right?
It goes
60 million.
in the plan we have in 2024, it goes from 16.3 million to 13.4.
Right, so we're going to see that moving forward as well. So I think this might be the year to start that transition plan, put it in place. as we move forward with all the other issues that are becoming our way as we move forward in the next couple of years. I think it's been really difficult, I know for everybody, especially since in 2008 to 2010, boards that were here really cut that budget down to skin and bones. I mean, there was no wiggle room. And then you got hit with the money we had, put 1.8 in per year for solar, which strapped you and made it even more difficult. This year, and then with the evaluation we thought was going to help us, it hindered us and it made it worse. And the budget kept going up and up and up. Not the budget, but our cost for the taxpayers kept increasing. Even today, going from what we thought was be about $21 up to where it is now. So that didn't work in our favor either. So right now it's a difficult budget, and if you're interested in cutting it, it's going to be hard, but it's something we might have to look at.
Well, George, do you want to say anything?
I hate to keep bringing up the solar. Solar was crippling, and it was more than 1.8. 1.8 is what we were able to settle it down to. It was actually a 2.4 when we first had to deal with it in the 2016 budget, 2017 budget. It's a lot of money, and when you think about it, that would have been the time to be able to use that money effectively to move down the capital. We also reduced capital projects at that point to in excess of $13 million a year down to 10.5 and then down to below 10 million. So we had moved into that direction. Problem is, government's not cheap. Everything from roads to roofs. I'm a big fanatic about making sure your roof doesn't leak. So whether you have the money or not, you have to come up with the money. We all own houses, and we all know that the roof leaks. It's going to help. Our trucks are falling apart, and it's not falling apart because of not being taken care of, because they are being taken care of. It's because they're constantly dropping salt down, so that has a residual effect on our trucks. We have an excellent, our engineers in the back. I don't think anybody could be more creative and more efficient in the way that we do our roads than we have right now. I agree with you about reducing the capital, and that is why we moved hard from moving it from 13 down to 10. But in the defense of 13 and 14 and 15, those also go back to the years that Sylvia was talking about, 2008, 2009, when the bottom fell out. And it was the only way to get things done. Plus, at the same time, we also had a number of bridges. How many bridges were fixed in the early 2010s?
As a result of that storm, we had about 160 bridge projects.
160 bridges. A lot of the debt that you are looking at right now and saying it's astounding is that it's damages that were done by Mother Nature. It wasn't even Sandy, it was
It was Irene and Lee, Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee.
Yeah.
That's right.
Those two, if you take a look, it's really important as we go forward and try and come up with a plan here to understand why we got where we got. I don't know, I know people can point to different years and say we spent a lot of money in 2001. I'm not sure what happened in 2001. But I do know we did reduce those budgets substantially in the early 2010s until we hit the solar patch. We were moving in the right direction. We were talking about the money in the homestead. I said it's kind of a funny thing. It's a little bit of a three-card Monty, but at the same time, it was what was done. I voted against it, but it happened. The money is there as an asset. It's not there in its full liquidity. That increases, that improves as we get closer to that 2024 date. Is that correct? The money starts to flow in most part.
We'll be getting our investment back.
Our investment comes back and it's liquidity.
There is some money there.
There's some money there, right? No, I just wanted to say though, it's a lot of what you're talking about are things that we discussed and tried to implement. And for one reason or another, it makes it difficult. The 911 center, for every increase that we got of somebody coming in, where we bring in an extra $25,000, there was another bill for $200,000 plus another capital bill for $1 million or $1.5 million. I'm looking at the sheriff's department, where all the others bills, prices, increases went down or were flat. We're looking at substantial increases in the lines on the sheriff's department. The 911 center. The 911 center is something that we just keep pouring money into and pouring money into, and I don't believe we're really getting our investment out of. I'm starting to float a little place. That's not what I meant to do.
There are 450 bridges. Is that correct? How many bridges do you have?
448.
448. I rounded it off. I added 2 bridges. They all need to be repaired. 330 miles of
310 centerline miles of road.
Correct me twice, huh? I'll be at your office.
Okay.
We have a lot that gets done here in the county, a lot that we have to do. We have 73 or 74 percent of the acreage, 70 of the acreage in the county is controlled by the federal government or the state of New Jersey. We have about a 24 percent, 24% of buildable property that we have to deal with. What Mr. Gatwood just brought up: streams, stream encroachment, steep slopes. I guess we have to deal with the county conservation district, soil conservation district. So we have a lot of restrictions. The state came in and took the highlands. We protect the water for the entire state of New Jersey, northern state part of it. We get nothing back. We have homes that are still not reaching their original value. So I think we need to do something to give some relief. Now, if you look at the reserve account, we have 14.9 in there.
14,
What's it? 14.9%.
14.9%.
14.9%.
16.3, here's the numbers.
Okay, so we have 16.3, and we said, we agreed on the board that we would go with 15% of the total amount of our budget, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. And what we did was we took one thing, we said we're going to do that. And with the homestead money, we'll call it the homestead because everybody knows it's that, we did one thing. We didn't put it in a bigger overall plan. And I think that's what hurts us. And if you look at what was done in 2007 with that funding, which was down going up, it was down as low as $7 million at one point. So, and it's been built up. And I think the board should look at somehow using that money and reduce some of the cost here with budget. I know that we said we weren't going to do that. Or we should use the homestead money to reduce some of the budget. And, you know, we're talking about, what, $20, $25, $26 per household. Somebody may say, well, that's not a lot of money. Well, it is in the long run. I think that it's an indication that we need to demonstrate that we can control that, reduce that, and really work on a plan for next year and the following years. So,
Yeah, I think, you know,
that's all I'm going to say.
as a general practice, you know, it's a different financial attitude. I mean, George had a point about things happen, especially in government, especially when you're managing this large an area. Things are going to happen that come up, and just like in life, certain things come up. If you don't have the cash, you borrow it. You got a leaky roof, and you got to fix it, and you don't have the cash, you borrow it. But then you work on paying that down, because what happens when you don't is now you borrowed that money. Now you have your driveway goes out or whatever. You have solar. Now you have to borrow that money, and then it's just this snowball effect. And before you know it, you're $113 million in debt. You owe more than you make, and there's no way out. Now, you know, as a regular person, you can't just call your boss and say, hey, you know what, I got a really bad debt, probably need to give you a raise. But that's what we ask taxpayers to do, right? We ask them, hey, we need more money, we gotta pay this problem off. And that's not fair either. But, you know, we're in this problem. It happened for whatever reason, whether it was storms, whether it was, you know, building buildings back in the 70s, which I understand started the debt. But when you're in debt, you make bad decisions because you have to. You have to stop the cycle.
Well, here's my question too. As far as the 16.3 million unrestricted fund balance, it's artificial to raise your fund balance to go and lower to make things comfortable. It's a highly artificial means of lowering the impact. However, it is the taxpayers' money, you know, that we keep in reserve. My point is to not touch the 16.3 because we're hovering around, what, 14.91% is in our balance right now. I don't, to make the most simple analogy ever, I don't want the county to be in the situation where we have our $7.6 million bond, and you know, like the person that has $10,000 in credit card debt at 21%, and you know, but keeps paying into a savings account that's returning 1% instead of paying what they have. I don't want to be in a situation where we're sitting on funds that are available to us and we're not using those funds in order to offset, and then we're just borrowing, incurring more interest. It's penny wise, it's pound foolish. So again, I'm not in any way insinuating we touch the 16.3 because we simply can't. But if there is a way, again, I would like to see it go, and I know we're in the 11th hour here, we have a week to do this, perhaps two, but a way to somehow access and take a look at the budget specifically in senior social services and see if any of that 7.6 could be accessed for something that we're doing there that is a one-time and not a recurring. It could be a pipe dream, but.
And maybe, you know, future, like we talked about earlier, was now maybe we get this money invested and we continue to use that interest, continue to use what that investment makes on a project or on a reoccurring cost of something in the senior program.
Okay. Can I ask a question?
Sure. Okay, George.
How far away, we had talked about this, and I don't know whether it's been addressed recently. The bonds that we are paying on with the solar, are any of those worth recasting? Or do we get any place where we can do anything that improves our situation on that? I know MCIA is
Well, the option is not yours, it would have to be the
Right.
MCIA, and they did do it 2 years ago. They have been, they were refinanced.
They
at
were
a lower
refinanced around
interest
15
rate.
or something.
2 or 3 years ago,
Okay.
but the interest rates have gone up since then.
Okay.
So I think, you know, that's something that a investment banker would need to look at, and they look at Sussex County's debt and every municipal debt at any point in time. That's how they make their money, by refinancing your debt.
Right.
So you can ask Phoenix, I guess, if,
Is there a certain amount of years that you have to wait?
I actually, Ray, if you don't mind,
go ahead.
we actually did take a look at that, I want to say back in 2017, shortly after I arrived, because there was some question about whether or not those monies could be reinvested. As they already had been refinanced in 2015, there was a limitation that was put because of the tax exempt nature of those bonds, and so there were limitations on what could be refinanced. As I recall, and I'll go back and speak with the Assistant Treasurer, Rob Mikas, there was an analysis done, and it was determined that it wouldn't have made sense, at least in 2017. There was some point in the future that we could ask the forecast to be refreshed to see if it made sense in terms of refinancing those. So the time might be right to go back and take a look at it, but I do recall in 2017 we'd done an initial look to see if it made sense, and it didn't make sense at that time.
Well, one thing I very strongly urge is for this board to do, we talked about last year, but I guess we never really got to the paperwork end of things, is to ensure that the future boards do not back bonds that really are not, they're not our bonds. I mean, we backed a bond here that was not our bond. It was something that was completely outside of our purview, and it never should have been done, but it was done. And The only thing is, if we do something like that, I do strongly urge that we be careful about not restricting out some of the activity that happens with our own schooling. We need to be careful, because we are backing bonds there too. So just, when we do that, I just hope that we are very careful about how we write that.
And, quick question.
And that, by the
So-
way, that was listed, I'm not sure if you're at the meeting, that it was listed as one of the projects that we're working on. That,
You said that at the beginning of the meeting.
yeah,
But
and
good.
I think Bruce did a story on it.
You know, we had talked about this earlier, that, you know, if we can refinance bonds and get better rates, that's great, but it doesn't seem like rates are going down. It seems like they're going the other way. So, you know, in my mind, getting to a point where we're paying for our capital projects in cash and bonding less at higher rates would be the way to get to where we're going. At least that's what I'd be inclined to want to do, is every time we can save money, can save somewhere to put it into these capital projects and just stop the bleeding. Go ahead, Dawn, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, this is helpful, this is an interesting sheet,
Yeah.
I'm very interested to see where Warren County lands on this. They're looking at something very positive this year for their budget, but I do see that their average county tax is higher than here, but, you know, if you read coverage of what's happening there, the ratios are a lot different than ours, and they, I don't know, they're comparable, one of the more comparable counties to us, and I believe they are going to be at the lowest, their lowest tax rate since the early 2000s.
Lowest budget, right?
Lowest budget, so their amount of their budget is actually lower than what it was in 2002, 2004. 2004, yeah, I just read that today. Their debt is under $2 million. It's astounding what they were able to do with a plan that they put into place in the early 2000s. And I feel like this is our early 2000s, just 15 years later. I mean, I think there's a lot to be learned. They're not the same demographic. It's not the same. It's you know. But again, we're not talking apples and oranges. You know, we're a little more similar. And again, I think that there's much to be learned in branching out and reaching out and speaking to other counties. We're never going to find our mirror image, but I'm very interested in that, in speaking with other counties who are experiencing success.
Well, you didn't have the financial problems that you had in the interim. Without the skill, you wouldn't be in this position right now today. And I think the point is well taken, that from today on, we have to look at things differently. And we do have to put the transition plan into place moving forward.
Warren County, when they put a lot of their policies in place, their debt was half their income. Our debt is well over what we bring in. It's not even apples to oranges, it's apples to broccoli. It's, you know, we're in a much worse position than they were in. When they wanted to reverse that situation, they just didn't like being in debt to the point that they were in. But you can see by looking at that, you know, they have a much higher tax per household. So, you know, they did it two ways. They cut, you can see all the things that they did to cut to get rid of bonding, but they also increased taxes at that point to get here.
Either way, we're not other counties, but it's very helpful that you gave this because it does put it in perspective for us. It allows
Really
us to see
does.
where we land, you know, across the state. But it's a cold comfort when the tax bill comes to say, well, look, you were number 9. You know, that doesn't that feel great? Probably not.
No, thank you.
Any other comments?
Herb, if I may.
Sure.
Just a few thoughts from what I've heard this evening. I have to say, I heard something tonight I probably haven't heard, or if I've heard in the last 20 years, I haven't heard it too much, and that is recognizing county government for what it is, and that is it's a service industry. And how are services delivered? Services are delivered by people. And in the case of local government in New Jersey, our workers are represented by public unions. And this comment is not intended to demonize our workforce or the public unions that represent them. But with a unionized workforce, there come contractual salary increases and certain benefit costs. And if we go back and we just take a look at where the greatest increase is in the proposed 2019 budget, between group health insurance and the statutory expenditures, the majority of which are our pension obligations, you're looking at $1.4 million, or 58% of the total increase in the proposed county budget. So while I certainly have an appreciation, I've been involved with this for many years, being very mindful of spending other people's money, it is a very real challenge when you look at the types of increases that all local governments have had with group health insurance and statutory expenditures. Now, why do I mention this? I mention this because we have seen some success in working with the PBA to change a base medical plan that's achieved real savings. And we are working with our other unions to see if we can't implement a similar base medical plan that could yield upwards of 16% reduction in premiums. The benefit of that, of course, is not only does the county see a reduction in its overall expenditures for health insurance premiums, but also as a result of the implementation of Chapter 78, the employees themselves will see ever greater amounts in their paycheck. But it is reassuring to me that members of the board have that understanding about what it is we are. We are a service industry. We serve some of the most marginalized population in our county, and we have an obligation, particularly in terms of economic development, of making meaningful investments in our transportation infrastructure. And for anyone that's ever had any responsibility for managing any kind of utilities, it's expensive work. You know, the materials, the cost of labor, the amount of time and energy and money that goes into designing things, ever-changing regulations that require updates, and you see that in our capital expenditure that's proposed to improve obsolete and outdated guide rail systems that date back to the 1970s. And that leads me to comment to echo what Freeholder Hertzberg has said. It's important that the public understand that the change in Sussex County, particularly as it pertains to capital project financing, has taken place over more than 30 years. And the turning point was the construction of the jail, when the county moved away from pay-as-you-go and started to borrow money to be able to cover the costs of large capital projects like that. So I say that, I mean, both for the board, which certainly the board understands, but also the members of the public. If it takes 30 plus years to get to a position that you find yourself in, it's not as easy or as simple as turning on or off a light switch and expecting that, you know, next year we'll find ourselves in a completely different financial position. If it takes you 30 years to get there, it's going to take you some years to get out. And I think that, and I applaud the board for dedicating itself to developing a plan, and look forward to working in cooperation with you so that we can advance a change in the way in which our capital projects are financed. I also do want to mention that, you know, on the plus side, the county will see some events taking place over the next few years in terms of changes in shared services agreements, in changes in medical insurance that I've already mentioned, recognizing the solar debt that's coming off. And if the board commits itself to a plan of changing the way that we do our financing, there will be revenues and reductions in appropriations that will create the kind of opportunity where we can look to fundamentally change the way that we're doing our capital project financing, be able to put more in the general fund appropriation for capital improvement fund, and ultimately reduce the overall amount of debt that the county bears. The other thing that I do want to share, because again, I've been at this for a long time, having managed a large municipality in Morris County during the time of the recession. And during that time, actually achieving a credit agency rating increase during a recession. I understand cost-saving measures, how to implement those things, and really being able to squeeze the life out of a dollar. And any of my former co-workers and elected officials that I've worked with will comment to you in terms of my eye towards saving costs. It's important both for the board as well as the public to know, and certainly the staff that have been here for some amount of time, previous boards have taken full advantage of cost-saving measures that I know this board would otherwise seek to implement. I know that our 2 new members had the opportunity of participating in an orientation, and you got to hear from the various departments and the challenges that are presented in terms of the county being able to meet its objectives in service to the taxpayers because of all of the cuts that have taken place. Now, I'm not saying that we can't be creative, and I'm not saying that there aren't opportunities to reanalyze and to look again at where we're spending money. But it really should be understood that much of the low-hanging fruit, and then even beyond, have already been taken advantage of by prior boards, and that has contributed to some of the challenges that we're faced with. So we ultimately, moving forward, will have to balance what the expectations of the taxpayers are by way of service with the taxes required in order to furnish those services. And that's what I have to say about that.
And I think one thing that none of us mentioned was one alternate route of creating revenue. You know, I know that there used to be an economic development committee in the county. We got rid of that for an economic development partnership, which was a public-private partnership, but we stopped being partners. We stopped being partners, and that's one way we can try and create revenue is by, once again, being partners with the economic development in this county and bringing businesses here and bringing revenue into the county. That's something I think that we are severely lacking, and I think we need to work with the townships and work with the other local businesses and local groups that are doing that.
This is the year we started to do that.
Right,
This
yes.
is where we started to do. We couldn't do it before, but we did make investments in the Economic Development Partnership. And this year with what we have in our budget towards that, we're going to be able to look at different aspects related to economic development and take more of a partnership role.
Right. And I was really glad to see that.
Yeah.
We put it into the budget 3 times. 3 times when I was on the committee, put it to the budget. 3 times it got taken out before it came before.
It wasn't in last year's budget.
No, but it is
Oh,
now.
you put it in your
This
budget.
is here.
We talked about, cutting.
Did it get taken out last year too?
Yeah, it wasn't in, and I think we joined for $1,500.
Yeah. Because I had tried to get 25, first 5,000, then 2,500.
I look at it as a smart investment. We're investing in our future. That's where we need to put our manpower and our money.
Well, we got to open up some doors with that, and that came through GIS and also through engineering to allow the Economic Development Partnership more of an in-kind type of thing, to have more access to our abilities to give information to people who wanted to come in and invest in the county. And I think that Don Drake and the Economic Partnership took advantage of that. But that was sort of the way of doing it without the cash.
Well, the Economic Development Partnership itself has been working on all year a new strategic plan into who they are, what their mission is, and how they're going to work with municipalities throughout the county. So they themselves are looking at things to expand and change some of the processes that they had involved with economic development throughout the county. So that's a very interesting conversation there as well.
Yeah, I have another comment. As far as us having our orientation to speak to what Greg had discussed, it was very helpful to meet with the department heads. I don't doubt the services that the county is providing. I think they're delivering with fidelity. I think they're outstanding. Thank you to Elka for preparing things and very, very quickly respond to response time the second. It's really, really outstanding. To the, seminars, who, always a wonderful response time. To Greg, who diligently works to, with negotiations, and he just is, his hands are in so many different areas. It has to be that way. And again, to our department heads, but, when you reference things like prior boards have already, rated the low-hanging fruit or whatnot, we've been in the orchard here for 10 minutes, and we're hopeful that we're going to be able to find some more fruit somewhere. So, please forgive me if I don't take your word for it. But, I no disrespect, but I feel like, we have some work to do.
And I think the good thing is that the board is in agreement with that. So,
Okay. Public session from the floor.
Everyone is asked to keep their comments to 5 minutes. Please state your name and print your name and municipality on the sign-in sheet. Please speak loud and clear.
Go get another one.
Hold on, 1 second. Motion to open to the public.
So moved. A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
What I didn't see in the presentation was your proposed local tax levy.
Well, repeat that, please.
I didn't see in the presentation what your proposed local tax levy is going to be. Last year was $92,101,859. What is proposed this year?
You have that number?
I didn't see that.
94 million.
yeah, it's there.
94 million.
It's right,
94.
it's right there at the bottom. The amount to be raised before new construction is $93,853,896, or 1.9% increase from 2018.
3 times 6. You're coming up with average numbers is fine, but average doesn't work when you're a taxpayer out there. With the chart of the equalized ratios which the county put out, 3 municipalities, actually 4, knife them back. 3 of them, Wantage, Sussex, Borough, Branchville, also happen to be members of High Point Regional. We're getting a double whammy. The other one was Newton. The odd part of this, the 3 outliners on the equalization chart, all 6% changes, are the same tax assessor. So I've asked the question, why is the same tax assessor treated the 3 extremes, the same tax assessor? Of course, nobody's about to answer me. We asked our prosecutor in the past, it hasn't happened. If we don't look at average numbers, we look at Wantage. With no tax increase in the county, we're going up $63. My numbers are not exact because I don't have all of it. My numbers for the school, the Department of Education collects the student ratio numbers in about the 15th of October. They refused to issue them to me until the middle of March. I guess it takes them that long to write the numbers down or something. So I don't have the student ratios for this coming year. They refused to issue them to me. Wantage going up $63 with a 0 increase. For High Point, we're going up another 20. For Sussex Wantage, we're going up another 22. All with no increases. Branchville is going up $55 for the county. High Point, you're getting nailed $77. $30 and no tax increases. I don't know what their grammar school is going to hit them. I don't know what their municipality is going to hit them. Newton, with no increase, is $38 going up for the average home. The average home is $184,000. If you go to Wantage, if you go up 1%, we go up to a $78 increase. 2%, we go up to a $92 increase. 3%, we go up to a $107 increase.
Is
This is just based on
just on the
schools?
county?
Just on the county, yes. 4% increase to 122, 5% to 136. Branchville and Newton go up similar numbers. Other extreme, Sussex Borough, no change, minus $89. 1% minus 79, 2% minus 69. So this average number doesn't work. The taxpayers on one end are getting killed, the others are making out like bandits. There's not a thing you can do about it except destroy us. And this year, Warrenage happens to be in the barrel. Next year, we could be on the winning side. This year, we're getting killed. Branchville's getting killed, and Newton's getting killed. So you've got to look at the extremes before you just look at the average. With no increase, we don't know what Warrenage is doing yet. I'm told they are going to be increasing their taxes. So we're going to get 4 increases this year. 3 with no increase. And just back on very quickly on the DEP. They want to put these rules into effect on the streams in Sussex and Warren County. And they want to hold the hearing in Hamilton. There's 2 Hamiltons in the state. One up down by the Delaware Bay and one by Trenton. I'm assuming the one in Trenton. Why can't you folks ask them to have it up here? If we're the ones being affected, why don't they come up to Sussex County or Warren County to make their presentations? Fully recognizing there are setback requirements in place now. If you take their 600-foot wide requirement, 300 on each side of the street, it comes to 54,472 acres, where 85.11 square miles of land they're taking, in essence, and not compensating the owners 1 penny for it. Now, when Parrots, not Chris Parrott, sold the development rights to their farm, they got over $1 million. The people who own this land don't get 1 penny. Where is there any fairness in any of this? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to address the board?
Hi, good evening. Peter Knight in Frankfurt. Last week, I read an article in the paper which gave me some hope. Freeholder Firstberg and Freeholder Fantasia articulated things that I've been thinking, and that is we're in trouble. And we can't be kicking the can down the road. I'm encouraged tonight, but I'm more deeply discouraged tonight in having heard what I've heard. I'm encouraged that 2 freeholders have shown the light on what the real problem is. We're sinking in debt. And I say shame to previous boards who have ignored what was coming. You have to be forward-looking. You can't just manage the day-to-day. Now, I love the county. I think the county provides great services. And from a day-to-day standpoint, our road maintenance couldn't be better. Our snow plowing couldn't be better. So kudos for the day-to-day. But where were previous boards looking at the future? To assume this kind of debt, this burden, we talk about that in the nation. We're mortgaging our future, our children's future. For me, it's shameful. In terms of what I heard tonight is, well, we're now talking about it. Well, you know what? It's beyond too late. It is time to be talking about it, and it's time to do more than talk about it. I have a sense that the board doesn't get the insight of a line-by-line budget. They're relying on departments to come and do a professional job in controlling their budget, looking for opportunities, not only to get the low-hanging fruit, but the real meat and potatoes. I spent more than 30 years in saving companies, corporations, money. Went right to the bottom line. They realized they couldn't keep on increasing the price of the materials or the services they provided. So how else do you manage your budget? You reduce costs. Now, as an organization, as a government organization, I give the same parallel, whether you're an individual or family, you're a not-for-profit organization, you know how much money's coming in, and you know how much things are going to cost. I took two not-for-profit organizations that were swimming in debt, and I said, no more. We implemented zero-based budgeting. What does that mean? You don't spend more than what you get. If you're going to do something, make sure it was funded. It had to either create the revenues, or it had to be backed by some kind of support. I think, and again, I don't need to point out individuals, because it takes a team. That's why we have a board. So when I talk being critical, I'm not singling individuals out. I think people who serve are wonderful. I think it takes a lot to step up and do what you do. But as a whole, I can say as a taxpayer, I'm very disappointed. Now, I can't avoid maybe pointing out an individual, but I'll say the position. The county administrator for years should have been pounding on desks saying, we're in trouble, it's not getting better.
1 minute.
So this idea of, well, we're talking about it now, just doesn't float. Now, in terms of operating the county, it's not all about taxing private property owners. You brought up economic development. I'm chairman of the Frankfurt Economic Development Committee. We're not talking about raising taxes. We're talking about developing new tax ratables. We have a declining population. Why is it declining? Because people are leaving. Taxes are going up. They can't get jobs locally. We can't invest $1,300 a year for a partnership in an organization that, quite frankly, has improved itself in the years that they've been operating. It's time for Sussex counties to take the future seriously. Create an economic development
It's time.
department. And
Your time is up, sir.
Okay.
can I conclude?
I defer to the
May
chair.
I conclude? It's time to get real. Look for the future. Bring in new tax ratables. And that's where you're going to find money.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to address the board?
Good evening. My name is Neil Kenny. I live in Lynn Township. I couldn't get here for the first hour of your presentation. So that's just the way 80 rolls, it turned out. What I'd like to know, is it possible to get a copy of what you had up on the board? Because I didn't see that before.
It's a work product, it's not a,
So it's not available to the public?
I don't know, is it a work product? It's not a.
I certainly can facilitate getting you a copy.
I'm just for my own edification. We are where we are. And unless we do certain things, we're going to be either worse, I think for the worse. People don't want to pay more taxes, but they also want more services. So my suggestion is maybe they move down to New York 14 with AOC and get everything for free. Because that's not going to happen here. So I think that what the board, and this is a preliminary budget that you're working on, I understand that, so it might not be necessary. I do have a concern, when you talk about that $16 million somewhere, was that reserve that I spoke to you about some time ago? That I thought was $20 or $22 million?
Mr. Kenny, to be honest with you, I don't recall.
But there was like a,
It's
Fund
the,
balance is
it's
16.
the fund balance, which is 16, what?
16,350.
And if you add the, and I think what you're thinking about, because you're wrong, if you add the other $7 million from the homestead, the number is, what, 23?
that was a number that was bandied around by people who were no longer on the present board. There was a
I
fund.
did that, no, you were here at the budget hearing last year?
Yeah, I'm lucky I know what I had for lunch today.
Well, I'm just saying, 'cause that's where that number, I think that's where that number came from.
Right, and I think it's a tempting, saying, hey, we got 16 mil, let's spend it over here. And that may sound all well and good, but when the fit hits the shan, and that 16's gone, and you're hit with a $20 million disaster plan, you're really up the creek. You're not even having a paddle, you're not even in a canoe. Okay, so I'm leery about that, biting that from the apple. On the other hand, I understand it's legal. However, when you look at the unions and the people that are working, and that's not gonna change. They're gonna want their benefits, they're gonna want whatever it is, they're gonna want their pay increases, I think that's human nature. But when Joe B retires, maybe we need not to hire Joe Z. Maybe instead of firing people, which is draconian, is to turn around and say, look, we're just not gonna replace people until we come to a certain point. Because there's an attitude, and it's just not in this county, it's in this country, where I want what I want it now, and I want it for free. And people are tired of giving people a free ride. I don't owe anything to anybody. Nobody gave me anything. I know where I came from, I know what I've done, and I know where I am. And I'm not into opening up the extra 2 bedrooms in my house to some people because they think that's the way to go. Okay, this whole socialist agenda, and I'm not saying that that's what you're doing. I'm just saying, the reality is, people don't give a fat rat's butt. How many people are here from the public, aside from myself? 2 others? This was advertised in the paper, people are well aware of it. And whether I like you or I don't like you, does not matter. You have a job to do. But for what it's worth from this person, you need to make some serious cuts wherever they are. If that means like 10 people retire and you don't replace them, that's 10 salaries that you can now put to go to maybe fix that bridge or something. When the bridges are down, everybody wants help, but nobody wants to pitch in. And you have to make it clear to the people of this county and these taxes and these municipalities, it's not letting me take that ship sail. And to sit here and to say, well, when George didn't want to do this, and then, he wanted to do that, forget that. It's like, I have other eloquent terms, but I will refrain from using them because people might be like, oh my God, we're not going to publish that. What I'm getting at is, this is not an easy task, what you have to do, regardless of your feelings, but you have to, I believe, not go into the kitty and deplete that, because I think that's, you're saying Peter, we're taking it all, and Paul is going to extend it frivolously. I don't believe that's the way out. And if taxes have to be increased, well, then so be it. If you can't pay the tax, then maybe it's time to move out of town. I don't know what to say, because you can't, I could go on and add more time. Why are teachers up? Why are they hiring more teachers? Why do they have a superintendent that says, I got the elementary school with 20 kids and the high school with 300, and I'm getting $400,000 a year? Maybe we need to just start being a little more creative and say, you know what? I'll get one superintendent and let him run all the damn schools.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Not done.
Anyone else wish to address the board? Seeing none, we'll close it to the public. Motion closed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
There are none. Yes.
If I may, I just, in order for us to be able to comply with state requirements as far as introduction, I would just simply ask for some direction from the board so that we could give our treasurer a clear indication as to how to go about preparing the budget for the freeholders' consideration for introduction. As we had it planned, depending on what the outcome of this evening's meeting was, I would ask that the board give consideration to direct the treasurer to prepare the budget in accordance with what's been proposed for 2019, so that the board could give consideration for introduction at its next meeting of March 13th. That would also include a resolution authorizing the library as well as the open space taxes.
Well,
I'm not prepared to do that. These numbers are, this is the first time I'm seeing these actual numbers. So I would need at least a day or two to really look at this, because what I had in my head is not, what this turned out to be.
Agreed. Agreed, same.
is there an idea of what, anyone have an idea of a lower number, higher number, or? Okay.
I would just remind the board that by statute, we are required to introduce the budget by March 27th.
I know you guys have a deadline, and we'll expedite, but I need a day or two to digest this.
It's fine.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
So,
In favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.